Hey everybody, Bandicoot Commando here and welcome back to Tomb Raider. Last time, we finished the final level. We finished unfinished business. We got through the Temple of the Cat level and that's it. The game is now complete and everything. There's New Game Plus, but obviously we're not going to do New Game Plus. So today, as I always do in most games, I'm going to go over some of the development history of Tomb Raider and go over and mention some things that were either in the game or at least were planned to be in the game but removed, and or just other little tidbits that I can find. So let us begin. Tomb Raider started development at the earliest in 1994 when it was pitched. Toby Gard, one of the main people that worked for Core Design, had came up with the idea. He was he was basically inspired by things like Tank Girl, Indiana Jones, and of course Prince of Persia, believe it or not. When Gard initially came up with the idea of the game, the main lead was originally supposed to be a male. The man looked a little bit like Indiana Jones, though, and they had to change it for obvious legal reasons. But once the change was made, there was the idea that the main character could either be male or female. But Toby realized that this meant that there would have to be two separate animations for the two different characters. So it was one or the other. He decided to just go back to doing one character and using the female character instead. The female character, who at the time was named Laura Cruz, was chosen. Laura Cruz is a completely different character than from Laura in the final game. For starters, she's more of a mercenary than a archaeologist Tomb Raider. And she wasn't really British either. She was mostly Hispanic, or at least Latino of some kind. According to her earliest backstory, she learned a lot of her she learned a lot about her skills and other she just learned how to fight and explore and all that from her father, who was part of the military. Yes, her father was a major in the Special Air Service and taught her all he knew of combat and survival. When it came time for the story to be made, one of the earliest versions of the story would more or less follow similar to the game, or at least it had similar beats, but still changes. The earliest story was that a multi-billionaire by the name of Willard Sterling would hire Laura to find artifacts. These artifacts would. Oh, well, there goes my source acting all weird on me. Excuse me? Let's try that again. Let's fix that. There we go. Now it's fixed. This artifact that Willard Sterling wanted was the Kirkabite. In order to make the Kirkabite, though, it had to be assembled since it was in pieces. Laura would go out to recover these pieces and upon recovering them, she would hand them over to his emissary, Lars Kruger. Lars would eventually evolve into Larson. After delivering the fifth piece to Lars, though, Laura becomes suspicious and would follow him back to Willard's HQ. And it turns out that Willard had set Laura up to recover these pieces because, in actuality, he is not a human. He is instead a Nephilim. Yeah, a Nephilim. If you don't know what a Nephilim is, traditionally speaking in mythology and legend. It is basically a angel-human hybrid. Yes, it is the offspring of angels and humans. At least traditionally, that's what they're meant to be. Willard was from a different world and was banished many thousands of years ago, wishing to return to his home dimension in order to resume trying to conquer it and possibly conquer Earth as well while he's at it. Upon returning, though, upon figuring out the deception, Lara would have then battled Willard in his monstrous form and not only successfully kill him, but would recover the artifact pieces and stop Lars at the same time. After that version was scrapped, the second version of the story is that Lara would find a diary that belonged to a dead adventurer from the 19th century. It would lead her on a quest called to find something called the key. The key apparently would have something to do with the master pyramid. Here we have the Atlans, which I have mentioned before in the unfinished business videos. The Atlans are trying to stop Laura for to get to the pyramid on the to turn on the pyramid for whatever reason. But in actuality, when she attempts to, she ends up switching it off, and it releases a monstrous creature known as Sanata Karoma. This monstrous creature, demon, was imprisoned in this great pyramid with the key. This key is known as the Scion of Mu, MU. From there, after defeating the demon, though, Lara would turn the pyramid back on and realizes that it needs to stay on to keep said monster from ever coming into the world again. This version of the story did stick for a bit, because version 3 of the story would be that Lara would be hired by a man named Arthur Hamilton Graves to find pieces of the Scion. However, Graves is also in charge of a group known as the Chaos Raiders. But same basic beats. Laura would be able to find the pieces of the Scion, and then same deal. By this point, the story got finalized into we know now. It seems, though, that the idea was always there that the main villain was always meant to give Lara the quest in the first place and to betray her near the end. It is a good trope to use. After that, once everything was finalized and worked on, lots of things changed throughout the way, of course. One of these changes that were made was when it came to the locations. Before Greece was used for locations, originally the levels that were meant to be the Greek levels were meant to be in Cambodia and Angkor Wat. Although, in the end, Angkor Wat ended up being scrapped and replaced with Greece. But they would reuse it in a later Tomb Raider game. Sometimes it's always great when you can recycle ideas. I mentioned how the game takes inspiration from Prince of Persia, the original Prince of Persia game, and this regards its platforming on how you move and jump about. And it's to the point that the doppelganger boss from Atlantis is actually one big homage to the Shadow Prince from that game, where same deal. It will copy your every move, and you have to trick it into defeating it. When it came to a lot of the creatures and enemies, part of the reason that they used animals more so than humans was there were a number of factors in it. One of the main ones was that at the time, Toby and the team believed that they would not be able to do conceivable human enemies. This is why you only take on a small handful of human enemies: Larson, Pierre, Natala's henchmen, and Natala herself. But the other one, in Toby's opinion, was that he didn't like the idea of killing human enemies, or at least just killing mass human en masse kind of thing. So he thought killing and defending yourselves from animals and creatures would be more believable. Although he did admit later that he realized that maybe that was a little worse because sometimes you might feel sorry for killing the animal enemies. There was also an idea for a location possibly being Easter Island. In this early FMV for the game, as Lara uses the ski on pieces, she would see a Moya head, and this is possible that instead of Egypt, Easter Island could have been the original location for the third and final piece. Few mechanics and objects were removed throughout the game and tweaked. One of them would have been permadeath. Of course, permadeath is exactly like that. It's possible that the game either had a life system or you had a limited amount of saves before, well, permadeath mode means that once you die, that's it. You have to restart. Another object that was changed and or removed would be the diary. The diary was originally a key item that Lara would use. Although it's not revealed what the diary would have done, it would be possibly used as a hint system of sorts. The diary was then replaced by a map. This map, which was made by Natla Technologies, was originally meant to be used. The way the map worked is something like this. As you explored through the level, the map wouldn't exactly tell you everything. It would only show you places that you've already filled out in the level. So the idea being is that as you're exploring the level, and if you feel lost or you don't know where to go, you can open up the map and it will show you all the spots that you've already been through and mapped out. Anything that looks blank and empty means that you haven't been there yet. A very interesting concept that could have been helpful for the more open levels, but at the same time, the levels are somewhat linear. There's just a lot to do to get to them to make it more linear. After this, the map would just be replaced by the compass, and the compass, as we know, can help with navigation, but I wouldn't entirely recommend it. One idea for other objects and items would be for weapons. Originally, Laura had uh, possibly the idea to use grenades. However, grenades were cut entirely from the final game. Whether this was because they would have to animate Laura physically having to pull the pin and throw a grenade, or if they just couldn't work out with explosive related damage, who knows. But while grenades were removed from the first game, grenades would later be used in later games. Although, instead of throwing them, though, Laura would use them through grenade launchers. The grenades were, in fact, a replacement of a different object, which is dynamite. And there goes the wiki fandom messing up on me. Why are you doing this to me? And now I'm getting a 503. Really? Come on. There we go. It is possible that dynamite was not really meant to be used as a weapon, but more as a tool. It would have, well, I mean, it could be used as a weapon, but it was probably meant to be used more as a tool, if anything. It would have helped you blown up secret doors and other ways to get through, and as a weapon if needed, but again, probably meant to be more of a tool than a weapon. Interesting fact to share is how there are two creatures in the game that are fully modeled and animated, but they end up going unused in the end. One of these, and they're both, I should say, they're both Atlantean creatures. One of these would be the Atlantean dinosaur, or the dinosaur warrior. It basically resembles a dinosaur, but it would be similar to Atlantean creatures, being muscle and bone. Based on its animations, it had the ability to attack with its claws, and it possibly was able to shoot projectiles as well. While the creature does not appear in the final game, it does exist within the game files, although unfortunately it's not textured correctly. Possibly removed because just there wasn't enough time to implement it, or the fact that it would have just been a bit redundant with other Atlantean creatures, which then brings us to the next one, the Atlantean fish. As its name suggests, it's just a fish. It would have appeared in the Atlantis level as well. All it would have done was just swim and bite Laura. But in the end, this creature too was removed. However, though, its animations and bite, its animations and its model would be reused for the sequel. They just had to tweak it and change its color. One factor of the game was that Laura was meant to have her braid in gameplay. Her braid even got as far as being in one of the early prototype builds for the game as a test, mostly as test animations and such. However, programmers just couldn't get it to work completely right, and not to mention that the braid was taking up extra data space. So, to compensate for this, they just simply removed it though. But from later, Tomb Raider 2 and onwards would retain the braid, and with Tomb Raider Remaster, the braid is as its functions in the first game. There's some development history that can go on with unfinished business. One of the main ones that I brought up a lot was that the Atlantis levels were meant to come first. Phil Campbell, one of the main developers of Unfinished Business, stated how Atlantis levels were meant to be first due to the fact that he already liked the Atlantis levels and he just wanted those to come first since they were the first levels he was working on. But he was told by Core Design, since he was making the Egypt levels as well, that no, the Egypt levels have to come first due to gameplay balancing, and again, according to Core Design, lots of players preferred the Egypt levels over the Atlantis levels, which I think is a load of BS if you ask me. When Phil was designing these levels. He had a lot of interesting things that he wanted to put in, but some of them he just couldn't for one reason or another, either due to time constraints or programming animation constraints. One of his main restrictions, though, was that he and his team were just not allowed to make brand new, just brand new models or anything. They were to use what were given, basically. They were allowed to change the textures and maybe even make interesting, unique textures, but making unique models and other things, that was not for them. Phil had another level idea that, while he never did bring it to life due to the fact that he didn't have enough time to work on it, Phil had an idea for a Greek based level called The Lair of the Monkey King. According to Phil, this level was meant to act as more of a race, as he calls it, being inspired from a website from back in the day that basically were about Tomb Raider players who would race one another to see who can complete the game the fastest. Think of it as a form of speed running, or at least it is speed running. The term just didn't exist back then. Phil liked this idea of racing through a level in Tomb Raider that he wanted to incorporate it in some way. The idea would have been is that as Lara was going through the level, she would also be picking up gold along the way, or at least lead bars, gold bars and lead bars. And it would soon get to the point that once Lara found all the lead and turned it into gold, she would use all of her gold bars to exit the level. Of course, in the end, Phil had to just could not get to making this level to come to life due to running out of time. But when he did reveal the level design sketch that he did, lots of fans attempted to make one, tried to make it based on his designs. However, well, I say however, there is one fan who made it in particular, and he made it rather interesting. Let me take a quick moment. The Monkey King. Yep, Lair of the Monkey King. Yep, Tomb Raider level editor, where this one user, oh, I mean, this is a person who did the video, but I don't think it was the actual person who made it. Oh, yeah, the level was made by someone called Cowboy Legend. So, through there, and based on what I can read, yes, he he followed through Phil's notes, having random lead bars and gold bars in order to find and to complete the level with. Maybe I should watch this when I can. Sounds interesting. Phil also admitted in one of he had a note in one of the design docs on how that while he'd love to make a Peru based level, he would have wanted it to focus on the Lost Valley. But this meant possibly creating more unique dinosaur models, which he knew that was not going to be accomplishable due to the set of rules that he was given by core design. So therefore, unfortunately, no Peru levels because he would have wanted to make unique dinosaurs and wasn't allowed to. An interesting thing to note would be how, while Tomb Raider was released on PC, PS1, and Saturn, a Nintendo 64 version was considered. Core Design even went out to try and come to make a deal with Nintendo about porting it over. Although, according to Gavin Rummery, I believe that's who it was. Well, if it wasn't Gavin, then might have been Toby. If I can quickly get back to Tomb Raider and find out. Um, I'm trying to see if I can find it. Ah, yeah, here it is. Core tried to negotiate with Nintendo to release a Nintendo 64 version, and they even tried working on an early port of it. But the problem was that I say Toby and Gavin, but really it is oh, his name is in here somewhere if I can find it. Paul Douglas, yeah. Paul Douglas was one of the people who worked on the game, and according to Paul Douglas, um, he said that they would have to redesign the game mechanics and possibly other things in order to make up for the fact that the Nintendo 64 controller and its button placement and such. Unfortunately, though, the deal and the port never came through, mostly because the group never received N64 development kits for them, never received development kits of the N64. They wouldn't be able to make their version unless they had a development kit to work with and find out. Plus, at the same time, Sony made a deal with Core that Tomb Raider games were to be exclusive to PlayStation, at least until the year of 2000. Of course, that would be not true, seeing how the next several Tomb Raider games were not only on PC, but Tomb Raider 4, Last Revolution, and Chronicles would also be on Dreamcast. But that's for some other time. As for some interesting tidbits and other little things, both in the original and the remaster version, one thing that I want to mention, as I try to sit up now, would be the giant Atlantean. I mentioned the giant Atlantean goes by a few names, also known as the torso mutant, the legless mutant, the abomination, the giant Atlantean, the abortion, whatever you want to call it. But what's interesting is that in a Japanese guidebook for the game, on the page with the creature, it goes by the name Adam. Why Adam, though? When a fan found this, he tweeted this out. Hold on, I'm trying to find the. Yeah. Adam is officially, or at least a nickname. According to Paul Douglas, he claims that the torso creature was always known as the abortion within the group. He explains that the Japanese strategy guys named it Adam so it wouldn't cause offense with abortion. However, some could say that Adam could be in a reference to the fact of the Genesis of the Bible. Whatever it is you want to believe, it's an interesting fact on how this creature does have an interesting name, at least a nickname for a Japanese guide. Speaking of Japanese and guides, there are some differences with Tomb Raider in terms of gameplay. Not just gameplay. Like, you'll see what I mean. If the thing will kindly thank you. Where is it? There we are. So, when Tomb Raider as I said, released for PC, PlayStation, and Saturn. The saving methods are different between versions. If you're doing it on PC, you can save anywhere, anytime you'd like. While on PS1 and Saturn, you'd have to find save crystals to use. That said, though, the remaster version runs on the PC version, so therefore you can save anytime you like. When it comes to graphics, the graphics on the PC versions are of the superior quality. The Saturn version offers slightly faster gameplay, but it does sacrifice a bit of graphical quality. What's also interesting is that the PC version doesn't include the additional incidental music that's used during gameplay. This makes things more interesting that the PS1 and Saturn versions play music at different intervals. When it comes to the Japanese version of Tomb Raider 1, one of the significant changes made is that the enemies are made weaker. They also use different images for different title, used for the title and credits and loading screens. When the game was re-released on Macintosh, one of the big differences would be that whenever Lara picks up items, she says, "Aha." This was something that was added in Tomb Raider 2 and onwards, or at least just simply Tomb Raider 2. There would also be the fact that when underwater, there's a blue hue and higher quality FMV sequences. If you were playing the PlayStation version, if you had the Greatest Hits edition, it would come with a few demos of games at IDOS to give you to play around. These demos would be Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, Tomb Raider 3, and Gex 3. It also had 2 video trailers for Fear Effect and Fighting Force 2. PC versions would be later reissued with the additional levels with Unfinished Business. Unfinished Business can be bought separately back then. It can either be bought separately and or as part of a collection. An interesting note in the remaster that I missed actually, to be honest, and I didn't know this. But when you're starting out in Laura's home in the remaster, if you look near the windowsill where in her bedroom when you start out, you'll see a magazine that talks about the lost city of Volcobama. This means, at least in terms of the remaster, that but if you choose to do Laura's home, this means that she did accept the job from Natla and was just taking the time to do research to get ready to go out on the job. But this only applies to the remaster, though. Another factor with the game and with Laura's home is there's a certain treasure at her front door. I already acknowledged it when I did the video, but just in case nobody knows what it is the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, for those of you who do not know, it's an artifact of sorts. Oh, great. There it is. I say it's an artifact, but the Ark of the Covenant, at least according to legend and history, it is a storage chest and relic, and it is said to be that it would hold the 10 Commandments. At least that's what it says, though. At least, again, that is according to the book of Exodus and the Old Testament and stuff like that. Of course, lots of us know it best from Indiana Jones. To a lesser degree, you might know it from something else. It is technically a public domain artifact of sorts. In the city of Volcobama itself is an interesting thing for trivia. I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention this, but I never got around to saying it because I was distracted. But the city of Volcobama is a real it is a real place. If I can just pull up the article, let's see. Well, yeah, I'm on the Tomb Raider article for it, but yeah. I mean, I guess the Tomb Raider article on the wiki can, yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe I should go to like the real article on, yeah. So, Volcobama is this, historically speaking. There are many different places called Volcobama, but the one that we are talking about is the one in Peru. Okay, testing. Let me check. Yep, okay. My mic got unplugged on me there. So, the city of Volcobama in Peru, eh, at least before it was discovered, it's an ancient city that was lost to time. It is said basically the city was one of the last cities of the Incans before the Spanish conquistadors, I believe, arrived. For a while, it was a lost city because nobody knew where it was. Even with records and everything, nobody really was able to find it. At the time, when Tomb Raider was being developed and released, Volcobama was still considered a lost city and still considered like, a legend and a myth. But roughly around, let's see. Yes, the modern names for the ruins is known as Espiritu Pampa. I hope I'm saying that right. It just simply means plain of the spirits. This location, which I can show with this map here, is here. As for when it was discovered, while it was possibly found a few times, people brushed it off as this isn't the city. Hmm. It was fully discovered and took proper research in by, I believe, by 2000. Yeah, by the year 2000, it was fully confirmed and more or less just accepted that in this location of Espiritu Pampa is the definitive accepted site. As of now, though, we still don't know anything about it because, well, it does say as of 2000, as of 2013, investigations were incomplete and the ruins were inaccessible by vehicle. But as of now, I believe that it is the real thing. But this wouldn't be the first time in Tomb Raider where or what we think is a fictional, but what we think is a lost legend that turned out to be a real thing of history. Well, basically, what we think is just a myth and legend, and then, oh, no, we found it. It is real. It's here. It's been here. Very interesting, isn't it? Well, other than that, I think I'm gonna have to make that do with Tomb Raider. There's a lot more you can learn and find out for yourself. Oh, actually, wait a minute. There is one thing I want to go over real quick. Laura's infamous boobs. I say infamous. So, supposedly, Laura wasn't really supposed to be that busty originally. Just maybe modest at best. But the story goes that when Toby was tweaking her model, he accidentally increased the size of the chest area a little more than what he wanted. At first, he did keep it a bit as a joke and was going to remove it, but Core Design insisted that he keep it. It turns out, though, that this story is actually a false story meant for an April Fool's joke. The actual story, according to Toby, was that Laura was always intended to have a big bust. He added it on the grounds of just wanting to kind of make Laura into like a satire caricature of a strong female playable character. Or at least I believe those were his words, as I looked them up to make sure that those are indeed his words. Let's see. Yes, he wanted a caricature personification of women who could be an action icon for the younger generations. And I think Laura does fulfill that to a good degree. A good status icon for women and men alike. Right then, I think I will stop talking. Like I said, you can find out more information here and there, and there are lots of other, things you can learn. You can find some of the staff of Core Design to talk to, and if you want to learn more on unfinished business, you can try contacting Phil Campbell. You can't really contact his other partner that was helping him, Rebecca, because as far as I know, Rebecca doesn't really have a Twitter. So, with that, that will do for this episode of Tomb Raider. I hope you all enjoyed the adventure of Tomb Raider here. It was quite a journey. I wasn't like when I was planning out the many games I'd be doing on my channel, Tomb Raider was one of those games I knew I had to do because it's such an iconic franchise on the PlayStation, but for a while I was just unsure how I would do it because with the way the game is structured, with the way the game is, and not to mention that I will admit I'm not the best Tomb Raider player there is. I mean, I say that, but, I think my performances might say otherwise. But I just wasn't too sure how to do it. There was also the fact that around that time, I was wondering, and again, because of me doubting my skill in Tomb Raider games, was I going to need to play the PC version or would I have to struggle with the console version? But thankfully, thanks to the remaster, I get the luxury of playing the PC version on console. And as a double bonus, I got to do unfinished business. And what's interesting when it came to unfinished business was that I wasn't sure if I wanted unfinished business to be a separate game or part of the main Let's Play. But because it is a form of an add on, DLC, I figured it would have to be part of the main game instead of considered its own separate game. But all in all, a very good game it is, and I was also glad to have some friends on board for it. I will admit, I mean, they might see it. I feel they might. Well, I don't want to say they stole the show, but I will say and apologize in advance to my friends, is that I feel like we might have detracted a bit from some of the task at hand, the subject at hand. But it's what friends are. We just talk and do things. So I will assure to you, my viewers, that any time I have any of my friends on, we will try to stay on focus and not detract too much from the main subject at hand. Or if you guys don't care about us detracting, then fine. But I still would like for us to stay focused on the task at hand. Other than that, as for what the next game will be, I will say this. It will not be what you think it is. Because what you thought was going to be Tomb Raider, well, what you thought I was going to do didn't turn out as it was. Tomb Raider happened. So, same goes to this next one. What you think might happen will not happen, if that makes any sense. I mean, you'll see. You'll see for yourselves. So, that is it, and I will see you guys later.